Thanks, Katie. So, good morning, everybody. It's nice to be with you. You're very welcome to both the building and the centre and the institute here. It's great to see the fruition coming to what was, where's Bernardine? 2 years ago, Bernardine, since the birth, yeah. So, before I start, I just want to acknowledge particularly my two colleagues, Dr. Bernardine Brady and Professor Caroline McGregor, for their work in relation to this, and to indeed to Mary Lynch as well, and Sean and Ferroig and various people that and ISPCC and various people that we've worked with over recent years in developing this. I think it's great to be at this stage. What I thought I'd do in 30 minutes feeds really nicely actually into what Caroline has just touched on around resilience in particular, was to look on what is the modern thinking not in relation to mentoring particularly, but particularly the kind of contemporary thinking in relation to new thinking around social support, resilience and empathy, which I want to kind of introduce to the conversation. Although I'm going to look at them separately, I'm going to try and bring them together, because one of the issues I think is that I think there is a big case around the research community internationally, including the International Research Resilience Project, which Michael Unger has led with Linda Liebenberg in Canada, has been that things have been looked, I think, a lot at in, particularly in relation to resilience, in isolation to other things. And I think in mentoring, we need to look more at connectivity. And I'll explain why that's the case. But I think to start with, it's really important that we remember that the purpose of mentoring, and if you consider all the programs that have been developed on mentoring, were for a very simple reason as a starting point, and that was around friendship. That's what the idea of having a mentor is. It's a friend. And I have many friends, some of whom are in this room, some of whom are not. And when I go out with my friends, which I do regularly in Noctons having a pint, I don't start talking about, are you mentoring me, are you not mentoring me at the moment? Is it you're around, is it not you're around? So mentoring is fundamentally a friendship relationship, with all that entails if a friendship is a good friendship. The good thing about friends, unlike your aunt that you didn't get on with, is that you have choice over friends. You can't get rid of the aunt you didn't get on with, who didn't give you a Christmas present for years. I still don't, I've never forgiven her. But I'm joking. But the point is that you have choice and control over friendships. And the key part of mentoring is around both choice and control going into the match, during the match, and as you exit the match. And I'm looking over at our PhD student here, Teresa from Prague. Teresa is studying the quality of relationships in mentoring in a very intricate way in relation to that. I'm working with Bernardine and I on that. It's interesting, I'm going to, a whistle-stop tour around, or a fast-track tour around social support, and I hope Bernardine forgives me because I'm extracting our book into 3 bullet points, but it's about type of support that you get from people and who gives it to you, the quality of it, whether you suffer as a result of getting it, and the amount, do you get enough of it in terms of getting support? And is it available in sickness and in health? Is it available in times of crisis and in everyday living? Really important questions. And you may select or deselect people in your head as you think about how you answer those questions. But I do think when we think about mentoring, this is important. In particular, Bulger's work from the Columbia University in the States, he is now suggesting that there is a new modeling of social support, which I'm suggesting here is worthy of consideration in how we value mentoring. So Bulger's work talks about 2 things. He talks about the power of hidden support. So if Sean Campbell gives me €20, which is incredibly unlikely, I know I got the €20. If I'm given the €20 and I don't know who gave it to me, it's hidden support. Hidden support is far more valuable and effective than support that you know is been given to you, because the next day you know you got it. One of the brilliant potential things about youth mentoring, and certainly in terms of the early work we did on BBBS with Ferroig, it's something that struck me, was the fact that there is very subtle forms of support given that mentees sometimes almost, don't realise they're getting it. So there's a lot of evidence that most effective, the worst form of support is one where it's declared in front of other people. Not alone is it given to you, but it's declared in front of other people. As a child, as an orphaned child, I remember, getting the free book scheme from Christian Brothers, who announced who in the class was entitled to it. Can you imagine how that made me feel? So hidden support is important. And the other new thinking on social support is this thing of what's called nodes and kites, okay? So a node is a relationship and a kite is a set of relationships. And it comes from Cratchard's work. So if you think about this from the point of view of social support, the center of the kite is the node. You know the string that comes out of a kite? It's the central person with whom you have support, a brother, a sister, or as we discussed here, a mentor or a friend. So if you replace the node with the mentor, there is also then within the kite, the mentor's close supporter. So not alone can you access support from the mentor, you indirectly sometimes access support from the mentor's close supporter. And then as you work your way down the kite line, there are mentor associates. So you could argue, for example, that a mentor who provides friendship to you gives you advice which leads to other social network opportunities, either then and there or in later life. You could equally argue that the mentee can be the central can be the central person, and the mentee's own close supporters and associates can kick in. In terms of resilience, and I'm going to, because Caroline has excellently covered key issues in resilience, but just to say, I don't know why it's doing that, but anyway, just to say that the 5 R's, remind ourselves, are key to resilience, are about responsiveness, relationship, reciprocity, ritual, and routine, coming from Robbie Gilligan's Handbook on Resilience. And you could argue that in a good mentoring relationship, those things should be really solid and there. I particularly want to make mention of Ingrid Schoen's recent work, beginning in 2012. She's actually written more on this of late. She talks about really understanding the interplay of factors in resilience. So there's a big argument about that. Resilience should not be seen as in the individual, it should be seen as ecological. Caroline McGregor's work on looking at social ecology, Brofenbrenner, is saying that you need to look at it across the social ecology. And also look at it in terms of socioeconomical, psychological. A lot of research on resilience has looked on it as psychological, individualized psychological attention. But there is also, neuroscientists are now emerging information on genetic and biological factors. Obviously the bottom 2 are ones that we in this room can do something about. But just to say that there is now a wider understanding. And in fact, I think the research has gone from the early days of Michael Rutter, post-World War II, and the origins of resilience was all about building up individualized resilience, helping young people to break forward and do well in life, bounce back, as Caroline described it. Then a move to saying, well, actually, we shouldn't just be focusing on young people, we need to focus on the environment. In fact, there's some swinging back now that we need to pull that back a little bit from just seeing it as environmental. But Joan has developed, starting with this PowerPoint, I tried to stop that and I couldn't. So I'm suggesting a mentor is important there. So Schoen's modeling of resilience recently is this idea that you can model resilience. Now, absolutely, as Caroline says, I think it should not be something that we think about a mentor having as a menu as they go out to meet their mentee. But there are 4 aspects to resilience that have not really been, I think, talked that much about before. The first one is that resilience can be a compensatory model, that you are compensating for an issue in somebody's life. It can be a moderating effect model, which is about coping, which is about just dealing with. It can be a challenge model, which I don't think we think about too much, but positive challenge can be, I don't mean criticism, but challenge. And then she talks about this idea that you integrate all 3. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I probably go through, when I do go out with friends with a drink, I go through all of those 4 in about an hour. No, I don't. But I'm saying we don't purposely do these things in our life. But it is an interesting way of thinking about it. And I think that really has an interesting suggestion around mentoring. I'm not saying that you would formally say to a mentor, the reason you're working with a mentee is to be compensatory, but just to think about these things as in the background. So Maston's ordinary magic, I think, particularly looking at Linda Liebenberg's work in Dalhousie University, she with Robin Munford and Jackie Saunders in New Zealand, they've looked at the resilience and the relationship on informal mentoring rather than formal mentoring programs. But they're saying whereas you can say mentoring support is helpful, it does a lot, it really is valuable, which is obviously why we're here. We wouldn't be here unless we believed in youth mentoring. But we can't overclaim it. It can be part of a solution. We shouldn't overclaim it as their solution. It's not a one-hit wonder. I mean, but that's not to say this in part-based. And in fact, I will put that even more positively. I think there is a kite effect on this as well, that you can do something good in mentoring, which enables a young person to believe, I can be successful in this relationship in terms of a friend, can lead them to believe that they can be successful in other relationships, that they can, you can have a multiplier effect, which I think is a reasonable assumption to make. And moving on to empathy. Along with colleagues here, particularly Bernardine and Brian McGrath, it's an area that is a growing interest for us here, and I'll explain why in a moment in particular. But I think the issue of empathy is important in relation to mentoring and probably hasn't got enough airplay that I can see anyway. So a basic definition is the ability to share someone else's feelings or experiences by imagining what it will be like to be in that person's bind, adversity or situation. It's a very literal definition, believe it or not, from the Oxford Dictionary, which is as good as Wikipedia as far as I'm concerned. As my daughter tells me regularly, if in doubt, use the Oxford Dictionary or Wikipedia. But it's not a bad definition, actually. A bit like resilience definition, we've discovered there's a lot of definitions, both from neuroscience and from social science on empathy. So you pick which one you think is going to win. So I think that one's okay. So if you think about empathy, by the way, it's interesting that if you look at Mary Gordon's work on roots of empathy, a lot of attention has been given to empathy development in children up to latency age group and through the use of babies in classrooms. Very good, very effective program. But our view is not enough has been thought about in terms of youth and empathy. I think it's something that I'm very involved in, or we're very involved in here in terms of UNESCO. So just to be really clear, empathy is not sympathy, as in my gums bleed for you and I'm sorry for you, okay? Nor is it apathy that I couldn't give two hoots. It's in between. It's that in-between place where not only do you sympathize with somebody, you empathize, you understand, and ideally in a mentoring relationship, you extend that to this idea of either static empathy or activated empathy. Static empathy is, I understand where you are. Activated empathy is, I understand where you are as your mentor, and here's what I'm going to try and do about it, which is a very different, a much more positive step. So I think, whereas we could look on mentoring relationships that are hatched, matched, and dispatched well, and as Caroline says, appropriately closed, I think that's really important. But during the match, there's questions about, for me, around, obviously, if you have empathy, you don't have empathy in a matched relationship, you've got a problem, which you might say, well, it's very obvious that you would have that, but I wouldn't necessarily assume it. Mark Bennett in Penn State has talked about, or has looked at research of mentoring relationships of students in universities. And sometimes older students, veterans in universities, are mentoring. I'm looking at my good friend from CKI here, Lorraine Tanzi. But sometimes in universities you get, people think I'll mentor because it ticks the box and it's cool, but I'm not really that interested in doing it. I'm not saying that in youth mentoring, but I'm saying in university mentoring, it certainly is an issue in some American universities. But I do think that the relationship between empathy and mentoring is worth considering. Lynn Jamison talks about the difference between caring for and being cared for. She calls it caring for and caring about. I think caring for and being cared for in a positive mentoring relationship is key. And it's something that we, Bernardine and Brian and Caroline and other colleagues that we are very keen on looking at in relation to empathy here. Just to wake you up, I want to tell you the story of Fred Davidson. I was talking to John P. about this morning. So Fred Davidson, I'm involved in a UNESCO project to create a heritage site at Mazine where the World War I truce happened. You know that horrific song by Paul McCartney called Pipes of Peace, which he should have been, I think it's a terrible song. Anyway, I'm conscious of being filmed, but it's in a video, so you can look it up on YouTube. But anyway, basically in Christmas Eve 1914 in Mazine in southern Belgium, German soldiers started singing Stille Nacht. They got applauded by Irish, Ulster, and believe it or not, Connacht Rangers. They got applauded for singing the song, and they broke into a chorus of Good King Wenceslaus. It ended up in them drinking schnapps, exchanging photographs, and and peace broke out for 9 days, much to the horror of the generals, or that German soldiers got out of the trenches and fraternized with the enemy. There's a story about a cat, which I shared with John, which I'll tell you privately, about a cat getting court-martialed for being involved. It's a great story, but that's another story. Anyway, Fred Davidson, so when it ended, they found they had empathy. They couldn't shoot each other, and were taken away from the front and were absolutely berated. The soldiers involved in it. There was another, peace broke out again the following Christmas in the Vosges Mountains. At the moment in Mazine, they're creating it as a UNESCO Youth Peace Site. It's a great idea, and I'm kind of involved in that at the moment. Fred Davidson was a soldier, and he decided that he would mentor the soldiers because they got such a bad time from the generals. And he actually wrote a fantastic diary on friendship and mentoring other soldiers in World War I. But here's the romantic bit. This is where it should be made into a film. He got shot, badly shot, in the leg. I think he may have lost a leg. I'm not sure actually about that. There's a documentary I've seen where it goes into this. His grandson has written his life story. But anyway, he ended up been taken back to England in a hospital, woke up. By the way, cameras at the time were the equivalent of Snapchat. All soldiers were given cameras in World War I in the trenches. They stopped doing it because they started taking photographs of people mangled. So the cameras were then taken off the soldiers. But he was really interested in photography. So he woke up in his hospital bed, took a photograph of this nurse, and married her. Isn't that a lovely story? I think that's really nice. Anyway, just thought I'd tell you that as an anecdotal nonsense, but it's not. Anyway, so if you break down empathy, there are components on empathy that particularly we are beginning, and I say beginning because Bernardine's looking at me, very much beginning to look at, and that is the connection between a sense of belonging and social connectedness. And I think these are key factors in mentoring. I think if I had a mentor who was effective for me, one of the things I would get is a sense of belonging and connected. If you don't, so I think these are positive side effects that are worth exploring in relation to empathy, but also in relation to mentoring, just an opinion. But I do want to give it a health warning. I'm involved, as you know, the whole issue of youth radicalisation is a major issue, and UNESCO are majorly involved in trying to look at prevention of youth extremism, and colleagues know here are involved in a major project in that. There is evidence, so it's interesting, the evidence around, for example, the use of media, including the internet, to recruit youth into radicalised groups, is not actually, it's a bit of an urban myth, to be honest with you. But it's about not having a sense of belonging as much as anything. There is a certain amount been written about youth being mentored for the wrong reasons, and very effective mentoring. You get all the components of we care for you, we care for you, and being cared for actually comes up in a negative, really negative way in this context. So Quilliam, which is an organisation in London, you can look up Quilliam, it's an organisation made up of young people who are young adults who were formerly radicalised themselves, a very powerful organisation. I've done a little bit of work with them. And Mark Bennon, I should acknowledge, is working more on this than I am at the moment. But just to say that mentoring can have a negative, that we shouldn't always think of mentoring as totally positive. It can be used in a harmful way. So the last thing I want to mention is, and I'm saying with complete respect to all the research that a lot of people have done on mentoring, including myself and colleagues in the centre here in relation to work with Sean and Mary on Big Brothers Big Sisters, and even on the work that we did with ISPCC. I can't believe it was that long ago, but anyway, that's scary. I would argue actually that there is a risk of over researching mentoring, believe it or not. And that we're involved in, particularly Danielle Kennan here, in training young people to be researchers themselves. If you go to our website, there's a whole array of stuff that we're doing on that. But I think it would be really interesting to get youth as researchers in on researching mentoring. I think this would be a very interesting possibility. And if you think of the participation agenda, they're entitled to it anyway, without getting into all the, you know what I mean by that, I don't even have to get into that. But just to say that we're graduating 300 students, Sean, is it? Ish? I think, yeah. More. Anyway, on Saturday, who have done the Youth Leadership and Civic Action course that we run in collaboration with Ferroiga. And from that, we distilled a Youth as Researchers project. And I have to acknowledge the work of Danielle Kennan, my colleague, in relation to this, because she's been really doing all the lead work on it. So what we do is we train young people to be researchers. They design a research project that they feel passionate about. It gets ethical approval the same as any research project does. They do field work, they analyse the results with the support of adult researchers, and they produce very innovative. The one thing we know in this building here is that we produce lots of research report on ink and paper that nobody reads, including the people who wrote them, including me. Lots of research reports are lying around not read. So rather than produce a research report, they produce a one-page summary with a YouTube video, and we're using this on an education program that we're developing separately. Very effective. We're finding it's really effective, let's be honest, for all of us of that age. Anyway, but one thing I would really suggest is, as a suggestion, is that I think mentoring could be thought about as the idea of youth as researchers and mentoring is a suggestion. So finally, this slide did not come out completely right, but it looks a little bit like Greek writing. I think there is something to be explored around the interplay of the current issues and current thinking around social support resilience and what we're interested in empathy. So there's something around the interplay between types and source, quality and quantity, whether you can get it in times of stress or normal everyday living, whether it's compensatory, moderating, challenging, or an integration of all three in terms of resilience, and whether it leads you to this point of belonging and social connectedness. And I think that is worthy of consideration in mentoring. Not that our president in the university is an engineer, I'm not. This is my attempt at engineering, but it's something like that. Thank you.